Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess and this is my ADHD lifestyle. You can find my Twitter and my Instagram handle here. Please feel free to follow me on both of those things for more of ADHD day-to-day life updates if you're interested. Also, if you like this video and you like my content, please like and subscribe. And if you would really like, you can hit that bell icon to get notified every single time that I post. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a different video. I kind of want to just sit down and tell you guys this whole story from start to finish. Partially because I want to talk about the ADHD diagnosis process. Not in specifics, but I'll get in that in a second. And also because I just kind of wanted to talk to you about how I ultimately found myself on the path of getting tested and finding out that I had ADHD in hopes that maybe it'll kind of give you guys some insight into what's going on with me and like where my symptoms primarily were. Maybe give you, oh hey, you know, that happens to me too kind of thing. So it's something that you could potentially learn from and maybe help you along your journey if you're still kind of in that process trying to figure out if you have it or not. First, I'd like to say, big disclaimer, I am just someone who has ADHD. I am not a medical professional of any sort, and I never ever claimed to be. Also, big thing on this one, I am simply speaking from my own testing experience. So this is not necessarily how it would go for anyone who walked into the doctor to get an ADHD test right now. You might have like a slightly different experience. You might take different kinds of exams and things. Kind of going along with that, I'm not going to talk about the process in any like specifics, like what kind of tests I took or what kind of questions I was asked. A big part of the reason is that for anyone who's watching this who might potentially have ADHD or even like a different neurodivergence, to be honest, a lot of neurodivergences have overlapping symptoms. And because of that, I don't really want to risk someone like walking in, being prepared for a test and getting diagnosed with ADHD when they don't necessarily have that, and not in a it's overdiagnosed way, just like in a I don't want to slow down your journey to like finding out, not knowing exactly what you have or thinking you have one thing when you actually have another. So I'm leaving all of that to the medical professionals. I just don't want to mess up anyone's journey towards finding out that they have a neurodivergence like ADHD or autism or anything in that area. Like one more little disclaimer, this is like really hard for me to talk about. Finding out that I have ADHD was like a moment in my life where I was very vulnerable. Not really because I found out I had ADHD, but more because of the things that led up to me finding out I have ADHD. It started with my second job out of school, which was like a digital design and development firm. It was a small company of about 20 people at the time. It was an incredibly fast-paced environment. It was a lot of detail-oriented work. I started in a role which was called digital producer. It was like a project management position. If we got a new client in, I would take the project that they're working on, I would set it up in a schedule, I would assign it to actual people who could produce the product, being like whether that was developers or designers, give the clients a timeline, talk with the clients, relay any information with the clients, take notes during meetings, you know, a lot of stuff like that. I would pretty firmly say I pretty much failed as a digital producer, which like in hindsight, like I really wanted that position to work for me and it just didn't. I really kind of wanted to pretend I was the kind of person that could handle that sort of thing, like multitasking and, you know, working on a lot of projects at once and, you know, keeping tabs on everything and taking notes. I was actually pretty good at taking notes. I will give that. Luckily, the company I was working at the time, they were pretty understanding that it just like wasn't a good position for me. I have to give them a lot of credit. They liked me as a person enough to really try to work with me. And keep in mind, I didn't know I had ADHD. They really wanted to keep me around. They really liked me as a person. So they decided to offer me a copywriting role that they were hoping to fill at the time that I was like really starting to kind of have troubles. And they were thinking that maybe this would be a better place for me to be. I've said before, I'm a content strategist now, so I am still like in kind of a copywriting position. I wound up going down this track because of this job, and I'm really thankful to them for that. At the time, I was still doing work that I would call very finicky. So it was a lot of like copying and pasting another writer's work into like a format, making sure all of the text was correct, making sure that it was copied correctly, that there wasn't like a mistake, and that things went out on the correct day, which arguably like these were all things I could handle. I definitely had less of this kind of finicky work when I was a digital producer with this company. And like I will be honest, like I messed up a couple of times, like in a couple of like big ways. So it was just one of those things where I definitely made mistakes, so I'm gonna like own up to that. At the time, I didn't know I had ADHD, so like I was making those mistakes that were coming from my ADHD, and I just didn't really know how to cope with it. You know, I was trying all these different things, and I was changing like what I was doing almost daily to try and like help, and it just didn't work. That's just the bottom line. It just didn't work. I was super stressed as this was all going on. Obviously, like I said, I didn't know why I was having these problems. I was in a very toxic mindset where I was like, why can't I do this? Why can't I just be good enough at this? And I will say this is like one thing that the job that I had at the time was not good for. They didn't really have the bandwidth to like sit down with me and explain like, this was the mistake you made, and like show it to me. I think there was one instance where a client definitely noticed, and then there was another instance where a client probably didn't notice, but the producer who was on the account did. I looked back at that mistake so many times, and I never ever saw the mistake that they told me I made. I never saw it. I never understood what they were talking about. They never really pointed it out to me. So it was just kind of like a non-matching environment kind of situation. You know, I was at a point where pretty early on in this whole process, kind of as soon as they told me like, hey, you're having problems, I was in this really kind of dark spot, and I didn't really know what to do. So I did the first thing I can think of, which was I went to see a therapist. I could see like, hey, this isn't good for you. Like I could see that, but like I didn't quite realize how bad it was until I started seeing someone, and like I was going in every week and realizing how anxious I was, and realizing how anxious I was at the office. Focusing. Really early on with working with my therapist, we discussed the idea that I might have ADHD, but we kind of decided to focus on my work stress and dealing with the stress in hopes that kind of dealing with treating some of the anxiety would kind of help me focus at work, do a little bit better, and keep my job, which is like what I was trying to do from the very start, as I was trying my absolute hardest. I'll say this in every video, if you have ADHD and you think you're not trying hard enough, you're probably trying hard enough, and you're probably trying 4 times as hard as anyone else. So I think it was about the time that the owner of the company sat me down and basically had like a, you either need to shape up or we're going to get rid of you kind of conversation. And I say it like that because as nice as he was to me about it, I will say I often did not get any kind of constructive criticism from the people I was working with at the time, and I don't think it was really their fault. In hindsight, he asked me if I felt like some of the people that were complaining about me were being fair. And to an extent, like at the time I said yes they were, because I was in such like a kind of dark, toxic place about myself. Like I really felt like this was all my fault. I wasn't doing well enough. I just wasn't trying hard enough. When in reality, I do think some of the things that were levied against me were a little bit unfair, and I kind of wanted being scapegoat for something that happened that was really kind of a team problem. Like, hindsight is 20/20. I don't think he did anything wrong, but the conversation really was, get it together or you're gone. I remember having like a really intense, I actually called my therapist as soon as it happened because I wasn't supposed to see her for another like few days. And I remember like having a complete panic attack as I talked to her about it. And she kind of talked me down. And I think it was when I went in the following Saturday that she was like, hey, remember when we discussed the possibility that you might have ADHD? She kind of brought it back up. So I was kind of desperate for some kind of explanation of why I was having so much trouble at work. So I agreed to get tested. I'll be honest, at the time, I wasn't super open to the idea that I had ADHD. I was in such a bad spot that this is like hard for me to talk about. Also, like, I feel like I'm totally gonna get at least one comment that's like, you're saying it's hard for you to talk about, but you're not crying. And it's like, I just don't cry, man. That's just not who I am. So I wasn't really open to the idea, I think because I wanted to blame myself for a lot of, like, multitude of reasons. Like I said, and some of it I think came down to the fact that the people around me were blaming me for things that weren't necessarily my fault. And so this is really funny because I've known that I'm dyslexic since I was little, like little. Used to write my letters backwards, had a lot of trouble reading, was in a remedial reading program for a long time. And like, I could acknowledge that I had dyslexia. If you Google dyslexia and ADHD, like the fact that I could not acknowledge that I might have ADHD, but fully acknowledge that I had dyslexia is very funny. They're comorbid, in case you were wondering, that's what the joke is. But anyway, I went to the test. It was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I'm gonna say that right now. Fun fact, if you're ever going to get a test for ADHD, just be prepared that it might be pretty long. I was working with a psychiatrist. I took a test. I was asked a lot of questions. Oh, the test was computerized. I don't know if that's too specific. It was a computerized test. I'm not gonna say anything more than that. No, I had my results in a few weeks. I just talked a lot about how I was pretty convinced I couldn't have ADHD because I was kind of blaming myself. I should say that there was some part of me that did hope I found out I had ADHD. Just so I had some kind of understanding, I guess. Getting my results didn't initially make me feel better. I still had to see a psychiatrist if I wanted to try any kind of medication. I got my test results November 29th, 2018. I was trying to get in to see a psychiatrist to get medication because that's one of the first things they tell you when you get diagnosed is that you should at least consider medication. I want to say finding out I had ADHD was a good thing. I found out November 29th, 2018, like I said, and I was let go from my job December 26th, 2018, the day after Christmas. Which to a lot of people that sounds horrid, but actually they let me go on a day when myself and one other person, we were the only people in the office. It was like the two owners, the person who did HR, and then one other of my just regular coworkers. So at least I didn't have to do that walk of shame thing in front of everyone. Of course, this was the person who sat next to me, so I got to kind of see them react in real time as I shoved everything from my desk into my backpack and promptly left. Thus kind of started my long road to where I am now with my ADHD, which I'm still very much on. But yeah, that's how I was diagnosed. It was largely because I was having work troubles, which is pretty common for a lot of women my age who find out they have ADHD, I guess. I found that out afterwards. It seems for me, a lot of times people who get especially women who get diagnosed in adulthood, it's either that one of their children gets diagnosed or they are having some kind of unspecified bad stuff going on. I've seen it in a few other people that I follow on Twitter that I respect very much who have talked about their experiences getting diagnosed as an adult. Either way, I hope that sharing my story with you makes you feel a little bit better about if you've just been diagnosed, or if you're in the process of getting diagnosed, or even if you're a few years in and you're still a little bit confused, or you haven't had access to healthcare, so you haven't been able to really do anything about the fact that you've been diagnosed. Whatever your reasoning is, I hope you found some kind of comfort in this video, or at least maybe some camaraderie. Those of us who find out in adulthood that we have ADHD, I feel have, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I have a lot of, man, I really wish I knew sooner kind of feelings. But yeah, it's what it is. That's all I've got for you today. Please remember to like this video if you enjoy my content. Please subscribe if you really enjoy my content. And if you hit the bell icon, you will get notified every single time that I post a video. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm always willing to listen to someone who's new to finding out that they have ADHD. And yeah, thank you so much for watching my videos. I love everyone who has ADHD so much, and I really hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'm gonna go. Bye. It's like, I just don't cry, man. That's just not who I am.